All right. I have three statements to read out. First, the one on the situation in the Gulf and the Middle East. The Secretary General is following the situation in the Middle East with deep concern. He urges countries in the region to avoid escalating tensions and work instead to overcome their differences. He encourages diplomatic means to address concerns, and is ready to support such efforts if desired by all parties. That statement is now online. And the Secretary General, I have a statement on Colombia. The Secretary General is encouraged by the progress in the implementation of the peace accord in Colombia, and in particular the completion yesterday of the delivery of the UN mission for the first 30% of the arms of the FARC-EP. The Secretary General encourages both parties to advance with further progress the implementation of their respective commitments under the peace agreement, and reiterates the readiness of the United Nations to continue to support the peace process as required. And that statement has been released both in English and in Spanish. And finally, I have a statement on the elections in Lesotho. The Secretary General congratulates the people of the Kingdom of Lesotho on the conclusion of a peaceful National Assembly election. He commends the work of the Independent Electoral Commission in organizing the election and the role played by the Southern African Development Community in assisting the Kingdom of Lesotho to ensure a peaceful political environment. The Secretary General highlights the importance of now focusing attention on the implementation of the SADC decisions on further strengthening democratic governance and stability, and reaffirms the commitment of the UN to support Lesotho in that regard. That statement is also available online. And as you know, the Secretary General is in Kazakhstan. He arrived in Astana a few hours ago. Upon arrival, he attended a concert that was hosted in honor of the Shanghai Cooperation Council's head of state council, which he will address tomorrow, and we will put out his remarks on that occasion. And tomorrow he will also hold bilateral meetings with the Kazakh president, President Nazarbayev, and also pay a visit to Expo 2017, organized in Astana. And I have a senior appointment to announce. The Secretary General has appointed Liu Zhenmin of the People's Republic of China as the next Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs. He will succeed Wu Hongbo, to whom the Secretary General is grateful for his commitment and dedicated service to the organization, and for successfully guiding the preparations of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Third International Conference on Small Island Developing States, and the Third International Conference on Financing for Development, as well as the United Nations Oceans Conference, which is ongoing right now. Mr. Liu brings to the position more than 30 years of experience in the diplomatic service, with a strong focus on the promotion of bilateral, regional, and global issues. He was deeply involved for 10 years in the climate change negotiations, including the conclusion of the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. Currently, Mr. Liu is the Vice Foreign Minister of the People's Republic of China, and we have a biographical note available should you be interested. And back here, the Undersecretary General for Political Affairs, Jeff Feltman, just briefed the Security Council on Daesh, otherwise also known as ISIL. And in his remarks, he said the group continues to resist, particularly in Mosul and Raqqa. At the same time, Daesh has reorganized its military structure, giving more power to local commanders, and is more focused than ever before on enabling and inspiring attacks outside of the conflict zone. Mr. Feltman said the threats from Daesh have been intensified in its use of the internet and social media to disseminate propaganda online to a wide international audience. Although the volume of such messages have declined in the past 16 months, the threat persists as supporters outside of Syria and Iraq collect and redistribute the propaganda. He added that also Daesh's financial situation has steadily declined over the last 16 months. It continues to rely chiefly on the same two revenue streams, sales of hydrocarbons and extortion and taxation, which may amount in tens of millions of dollars per month. His remarks are available online. And also on Iraq, the UN Human Rights Office says it has received credible reports that more than 231 civilians attempting to flee Iraq's western Mosul have been killed on 26th of May, including at least 204 people over 3 days last week alone. The office has been documented Daesh's use of civilians as human shields and its slaughter of people trying to leave Mosul, and notes there's been a significant escalation in such killings. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein, said there are no words of condemnation that are strong enough for despicable acts such as shooting children as they try to run for safety along with their families. He called on Iraqi authorities to ensure that those responsible for these horrors are held accountable, stressing that the victims of such terrible crimes must not be forgotten. More information on the High Commissioner's website. On the Central African Republic, our colleagues at the World Food Programme say that in May, violence in the southeastern part of the country has caused massive numbers of people to flee their homes and exacerbate humanitarian needs. Half of the population requires assistance, and more than 2 million people are now hungry. Stunting due to malnutrition is also reported to be widespread among children. Even so, the Central African Republic still counts among the world's most forgotten crises. Halfway into the year, the humanitarian response plan for 2017 is only 1/4 funded. And our colleagues at OCHA tell us that a high-level humanitarian mission led by the African Union and the UN began today in Addis Ababa and will then proceed to Somalia and Kenya. The mission will assess humanitarian situation on the ground and seek to enhance humanitarian support to respond to the devastating drought and focus security in the Horn of Africa. The mission will visit the Somali region of Ethiopia tomorrow and see firsthand drought-induced crises of the humanitarian response. On June 12th, they will travel to Dolof in southern Somalia to meet with impacted people and humanitarians on the ground before wrapping up the mission later in June in Kenya. And FAO said today that despite stable global food markets, rising shipping costs and larger import volumes will drive the global food import bill higher this year. The bill will now top $1.3 billion this year, and with more than 10% increase from 2016. The food import bills of least developed countries, low-income food deficit countries, and sub-Saharan African countries are on course to rise even higher because of higher volumes of imports of meat, sugar, dairy, and oilseed products. If you're interested, go to the FAO website. And today is... Exactly, it is World Ocean Day. It is no coincidence that we are having a conference. In his message, the Secretary General said, quote, "Oceans connect all of us, linking people and nations in cultural ties. They're essential for sharing goods and services around the world. The importance of our oceans to every single living being on our planet cannot be overstated. Today, we celebrate what oceans give us and reaffirm our commitment to being good stewards. As we speak, the day is being observed in the General Assembly Hall with a series of performance, talks on world-renowned ocean experts and explorers, representatives from coastal communities, and voices from current and future generations. You'll get more details when our friend Damien Cardonis briefs you here after we are done. And I will have a guest in a short while, and that's Geert Kepelaar, the UNICEF's Regional Director of the Middle East and North Africa, and he'll be here to brief you on the situation in Yemen. And along with Damien will be joined at 1 o'clock with Anthony Long of the Pew Charitable Trust, Milton Houghton of the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, and Dame Meg Taylor, the Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum. And at 3:30 p.m. tomorrow, there'll be a briefing entitled Oceans and Climate, The Way Forward. And the way forward is you asking me questions. So, Mr. Lee.
I'm going to ask you about some of the things that I asked you yesterday, but first on this announcement of Liu Zemin. I see that he's on the schedule of the Deputy Secretary General this afternoon, and also then at 4 o'clock she's meeting the President of Ghana. Right. So I wanted to know, can these things be open for photo op or whatever? It's
I think the President of Ghana is open. The meeting with Liu, I think, is just for UN photo, but you're free to get the photo.
Okay, and I wanted to, I guess, I wanted to ask you yesterday, but in Cameroon, which is I've asked you about before, those Anglophone region protest leaders were held over for trial. They faced the death penalty. One of them is a former UN legal advisor, Mr. Felix Agbor-Bala. So I'm just wondering, is there this is in the country? It seems to be an escalation. People, and I'm wondering whether. I know it took about a week to get the comment from Lansani Fall. Is there any more rapid response to the holding over of these leaders?
I think we believe that all parties need to address the current issues in a spirit of dialogue, and I'll try to get a bit more from Mr. Fall.
Okay, and do you have any, on this RIF issue, I just wanted to, and again, I want to be clear, I wasn't telling you to be quiet. I think there may have been some misunderstanding. Okay, my question was really just, if you could give some, it seemed like you said there's something might be coming the next day, so I just wanted to ask.
Sure, I mean, as soon as I have something, I will share it and not hold it. Demi.
Thank you. I have two questions. First, about the senior appointments of the Secretary General. Can you give us a breakdown of senior appointments according to nationality? In fact, I have been waiting to see or to hear one single appointment by any senior, for any senior position by an Arab, and I didn't hear that. The only exception was when Salam Fayyad was nominated, and his nomination was turned down by a powerful member of the Security Council. And of course, I'm not counting the appointment of the executive director of ESCWA. Can you give us...
Well, I mean, all of the, I mean, we can do the math for you, but all of the Secretary General's appointments are listed on his senior team, and it's all, who he has appointed and where they're from is all very transparent.
Yeah.
Your second
my
question.
second question is about Israel's announced yesterday building 1,500 housing units in the area of Jerusalem. Is there any statement on that?
You know, we've seen the press reports, so I can't really comment. And we'll take a look at it closely. But our position on settlements continues to be the same.
But that brings me to the same question I keep asking: is Israel a normal state to be treated normally, no less, no more, as you?
I think every member state of this organization, including the state of Israel, needs to be treated with the same rights and the same responsibility as all of the other member states. I'll come back to you, Mr. Abadi. Sorry.
Thank you, Stéphane. Egypt has promulgated a law severely restricting the activities of NGOs. They have to pay 15,000 euros to register, and they cannot publish a report without the authorization of the government. What does the Secretary General say specifically about this law?
I haven't seen the specific reports on the law. What I can tell you is that, as a matter of principle, we wherever and all over the world underscore the importance of civil society and the importance of allowing civil society to conduct its work. Yep. Go ahead.
I think it was asked yesterday. I was wondering if the UN has any comments on the announcement of the independence referendum in northern Iraq. Thank you.
We've taken note of the announcement that is by the authorities in Kurdistan, and we'll leave it at that for the time being.
Thank you, Stéphane. Earlier this week, you said that some diplomatic initiatives were underway to ease the crisis between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Have you had any feedback of the progress made in that direction?
No, have not received any particular feedback. Yes, sir.
Just about the MOSUL referendum that was announced by President Barzani yesterday. If it turns out to be a yes for independence of Iraqi Kurdistan, I wonder about the UN position, what that will be. And also, would you oversee this referendum that's actually coming up, as it was announced yesterday by the president of the Kurdistan region for September 25th?
As I said, we've taken note of the announcement by the authorities in Kurdistan. As separate from that, as a matter of policy and a matter of constitutional policy, the issue for membership into the United Nations is laid out in the Charter. It goes through the Security Council and the General Assembly. On the issue of whether or not the UN would participate in any electoral process, again, as a matter of policy, we participate in electoral processes, usually at the demand of the national authorities.
If the Kurdistan region would request an oversight from the United Nations for this referendum, Would you be willing to do that?
Again, I would refer you to my answer 2 seconds ago. Ben.
Yeah, back to the USG on counterterrorism. For the short list that is there right now, can you discount that the Russian ambassador to the US, Kislyak, is not on that list?
I'm trying to answer your question without giving you any information. We will know the. I don't want to mislead you one way or another. The announcement will come when the announcement comes. I'm not aware of a short list. I don't know when the announcement will come, but obviously it should come soonish, since the post has now been approved by the General Assembly. Mr. Abadi.
In that regard, when is the Secretary General going to announce the reforms, the general reforms of the United Nations, as he promised to do in June?
The development system reforms will be announced probably later in June. There'll be a report going to the General Assembly, and then he will present them himself either in late June or early July. Someone told me, but I forgot exactly what the dates were.
Only the development aspect of the UN? What
this
about
will be the focus on the development. The other things that he's spoken about will come as they will come. Obviously, the counterterrorism bit is an important one. Abdelhamid.
Yes, as a follow-up to my question, when Iraq was in violation of UN resolutions, it was punished. When Serbia was in violation, it was punished. Congo, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Somalia, Libya, every country on earth, when it found guilty of violating the UN resolution, including North Korea as we speak, it has been punished except one state. Can you explain that? This is
Abdelhamid, you know the UN as well as I do. From the Secretary General's point of view, every member state has the same rights and responsibilities. They're not two categories of member states. The issue of sanctions, or whatever you want to call it, is an issue for the membership, and specifically for the Security Council membership. So that's not a question that should be addressed to the Secretary General's office. Mr. Lee, and then Ben.
I wanted to ask you, the media authority of the government of South Sudan has said publicly that 29 South Sudanese journalists are on a blacklist to not enter the country and report. And given particularly that there's a mission there, has the mission said anything about that and tried to push back?
I have not seen those reports or aware that the mission has said anything. But obviously, as you said, we feel it's important that journalists be able to report on what is going on and what the UN mission is doing.
And I wanted to ask you again, I know I was sort of surprised. I'd asked you about Jeffrey Sachs in the past and his UN position and the things that he writes within the scope of his employ. And yesterday he wrote in a syndicated article saying that Trump, climate change sociopath, that he's a sociopath, which is, there may be many people that believe that, but I wanted to know, what is the relationship between this syndicated op-ed and the UN system? It's totally within the scope of his SDG mandate. So what have been I wanted to ask this right. I know you're not privy to the communications between the Secretary General and Mr. Sachs, but how is a member of the public to understand when he lists himself as a UN official? I mean, that's fine. Is it the Secretary General's view that President Trump is a sociopath?
No.
Okay. So if he has an official that's using the UN's name and he's saying that,
I think it is clear that that those words written by Mr. Sachs were not done in his capacity as a UN advisor.
How do we know that, though? It doesn't say it. Is that
you're asking me? I can tell you, and
all right.
I'll leave it at that, unless you have another question.
I do, actually.
Please.
I wanted to ask, I mean, maybe you weren't able to or you could find out, even in the absence of Mr. Guterres, this idea that he met with the permanent representative of Saudi Arabia. Have you been able to find out if it's true or not true?
No. Ben.
Yeah, just checking if you've got anything on the reports that President Abbas is ready to drop demand for settlement freezes of construction in Judea and Samaria.
I've seen. I think we've all seen those press reports. I've not been informed of any official communication to the UN on that end. All right, I will go get our guest.